cards or whatever. But at the moment, we have a simple, concrete, immediate example of how resistance can win. And that's what's happening in Cyprus. People of Cyprus have achieved more in 3 days of protest than Eamon Gilmore and Enda Kenny have achieved in 2 years of slavish submission to the diktats of the Troika and the bankers. Because they said no, and immediately they said no, the European authorities and their own government said, okay, well, we'll exclude people under 20 with under 20,000 euros of savings. Initially, they were going to hit everybody. And then, but they still said, no, that's not good enough. It's still unacceptable what you're doing, raiding our bank accounts. We're not accepting this. And the very politicians who 1 day before had signed off on the agreement to raid people's savings, then voted against it yesterday, was it? Yesterday. It was yesterday. Why did that happen? How did the politicians who actually signed up to this disgraceful attempt to seize people's savings do a U-turn? And the answer is because people protested. It's as simple as that. The people showed more wisdom and more effectiveness, more political effectiveness, than all the sort of hot air that you hear from politicians in this country or anywhere else, because they got out on the streets and they resisted. And that really is what we're saying to people. I don't want to underestimate the battle that is ahead of us. It's not easy. And, you know, some people will say, well, we had a few protests and they didn't work. And that's true. Because 1 day going out and marching is not going to do it. Governments can live with 1 day. The difference with Cyprus is that people hit the streets when this was done to them, and they stayed on the streets. They surrounded the parliament. They weren't violent or anything. But they stayed on the streets, and they made it absolutely clear to the government of Cyprus, we are not going to stop protesting until you reject this disgraceful attempt to rob us. And as a result, every politician, bar one, in the Cyprus Parliament caved under public pressure. And that is the potential for people power. But our problem is that the people who have the power don't really think they have the power. And that's, I think, the issue we have to overcome. And I'll just conclude by saying that, I mean, sorry, people may want to know about penalties and all the rest of it. I should just say the powers the government have given themselves are very draconian, right? They have given themselves incredibly, you know, they're talking about what's in Cyprus is outrageous, stealing people's savings. What the Irish government have done is in a slightly different form, just as outrageous. They have given the power to go in to your bank accounts, into your social welfare, and into your wages. And to impose penalties which are effectively double the charge that they're going to make you liable for if you refuse to engage with them. These are very serious and draconian powers. Every bit as bad as Cyprus. So we are every bit as justified as the Cypriots in doing what they're doing and getting out and saying we're not accepting that. And we think the most effective way to do that is to boycott the process and put it up to them. Now, we're going to have to monitor that as we go along, because that boycott on its own will not be enough. They can impose penalties, and we're not asking people to be hung out to dry. The test of whether a boycott, in addition, and we want to stress this, crucially in addition to mass protests, consistent, non-stop, rolling protests and so on, whether they can be successful, the key issue is, do we have the majority? That's the issue. In Cyprus they have the majority, and that's why the government caved. We have to have the majority, and we have to show that the majority are willing to act. And we have until the deadline is May the 7th for people to register by post, or May the 23rd to register by email. Now what we have to show is, running up to those deadlines, that we have the majority of people saying no to this. If we don't have the majority of people, we're not going to win. Do we have the potential to have the majority? I would say absolutely yes. We know from the enormous level of opposition to the household charge, and this year things are worse, more people are affected, and they're going to be hit even harder. 3 or 4 or 5 times, or 6 times or 7 times in some cases, what people were asked to do last year. So the potential to mobilise the majority of the country against this is there, but it is going to take work on our behalf. It's going to take delivering leaflets and newsletters through people's doors. It's going to require us being visible with protests on the streets. It's going to require